it is 6:03, so I think I will go ahead and get started. If anybody else comes in the next couple of minutes, they're not going to miss too much. But I also want to make sure that we're being respectful of everybody's time. So we will go ahead and get started. Um, all right, thank you everyone so much for being here today for job fair prep, readying your resume. With this, just some introductions. My name's Christina. I am one of the career advisors here in the AU Career Center. I work primarily with School of Communication students. I also work a little bit with School of Public Affairs students. I've been here for about a year so far, so this will be my second fair that I've gotten to participate in here, but probably I think my sixth or seventh career fair in my career, getting to help and participate in as a staff member. So it does kind of help me as we're sort of going through. This is going to be fairly universal information that we're going to be going over today, but it is nice for me to kind of know who is in our Zoom room. What are you trying to, get out of this? Because someone who is a first-year student, your resume will definitely look different from someone who's in a master's program, and that's okay. That's how it should be, but it's helpful for me to be able to point out some different things. So if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, we'll take a second. Please put in, your class year, your major, and if you've checked out the list of employers who are coming to the fair yet, if anybody's caught your eye, that would be lovely for me to know as well, just because, again, hopefully, if possible, I can speak to that. Yeah, I'll give you all a second. All right, I see a sophomore majoring in computer science. All right, excellent. I know we're going to have a variety of so many different types of employers there. Legal studies, class of 2028. All right, excellent. Sophomore SIS. All right, government NGO, another sophomore, political science. All right, oh, yay, excellent. Lots of information coming in now. All right, a lot of class of 2028. So welcome to our first year students. I think it's awesome that you all are planning on coming to the fair, want to be there, are looking at how can you position your resume early. A December grad from 2023, welcome to you as well. So definitely you're going to be definitely interesting to the employers because you are on the market and ready to start work. Sophomore, okay, some more 2027. So a lot of first year students, a lot of second year students, as well as a couple of students who are further in their career or have recently graduated. So feel free to keep putting stuff in there. So yeah, I see an SIS junior. So again, please feel free to keep putting information in there if you haven't had the opportunity to yet. But with this information in mind, I will try to make notes of as a first or second year student when possible, since there are so many of you in the room. But again, this information is going to be pretty universal. So with that, I think my last thing before we move on, because I do think, right, you came here for a reason. You want to find out certain things about either resumes or preparing a resume for a career fair. Again, I have lots of information in this presentation, but I also want to make sure I'm hitting on what it is that you want and need. So if there are any big questions, burning questions, I need to know this, I'm hoping to get this out of this presentation, please, please, please feel free to put that in the chat as well right now. And I will, if it's not something that I'm going to hit on later, I'll answer it now. But if it's something that's going to come up as the presentation goes, we'll kind of keep moving on. But if there are very specific interests, I want to make sure to hit that. So I see, how does a resume for a career fair differ from a resume used for an internship or job application? Excellent question. We are going to hit on that in the next couple of slides, and that's going to be a big differentiation. It's not It's not that different, but because we're going into a situation where there's so many employers, sometimes we need to make it a little more general. So we're going to talk about that for sure. Um, Let's see. Should we be including notable courses and projects we've done during school? Absolutely. If it is relevant to the type of stuff that you want to be doing professionally. So let's say you wrote a paper or did a project that involves work, like let's say research on a policy issue, for instance, just for example, and that is a type of policy issue that an organization like that is their thing and they're going to be at the career fair, that might be really good to show on your resume. Absolutely. Definitely research. That can be a wonderful thing too. So yeah, great questions. Again, we're going to hit on some of this stuff more in just a moment, but I'm glad to know that that's kind of where y'all's minds are at. So we will go ahead and start jumping into more of the material. So basic overview, fair specific tips, things to keep in mind as you are preparing a resume specifically for these type of events, because that is unique, right? This is a networking event of sorts. How do you make sure that your resume is ready for that? And then I am going to give you some overall tips for preparing your resume in general to make sure that it can be the best that it can be as you are kind of updating that over the weekend. So we'll talk about some formatting tips as you're writing your entries, and if you're really trying to elevate this document, some things that can help there as well. I do see that someone is interested in the Pacific Northwest National Labs Post-Bachelor Fellowship Program, and lots of others without specific positions. That is something that happens a lot with this, is there might be one that you're like, yes, this is exactly what I'm interested in, and then I'm interested in these general organizations, or I'm going to find out more about these organizations. Again, everything's going to be situational, so that's okay. That's a good thing. I'm curious if I should be making general resumes to hand out to others or specific ones to each employer. Also, will there be anything in the presentation on federal style resumes for the career fair? Thanks in advance. Well, you are very welcome. So to hit on these pieces, I guess let me go ahead and move forward just with this slide so you can kind of see what the next information is. So one of the things that I want to talk about in this presentation are kind of like the scenarios for having an action plan for preparing these resumes over the coming days. So to your question about should you really like be super tailoring these documents, if you have the time and you know of very specific things. So in the case of your example of the Pacific Northwest National Lab, you may want to prepare a very specific resume that is tailored to them because you know that this is their post-bachelor fellowship program. You can find information about that job. You can research that. They may have even a page on their website about that, and you can see what the very specific things are that that particular role entails, and you can tailor a resume specific to them to hand specifically to them. But for other general things, we're going to talk about that again, your scenarios here of what we might be hitting on. In terms of the federal style resume, I'm going to make mention of it. The plan was not to get super deep into it, but I'm happy to answer some questions as we get further into things. But that was not going to be one of like the big things to cover, but I am mentioning that they exist and when they might be appropriate. All right. So preparing a resume for the fair. So the big thing, no matter what, researching who you want to talk to. That is huge in this because obviously you have to make your plan of who is on my docket of who I need to interact with. And from that research, whether you're utilizing whether you go into Handshake and look at the employers and their information under the career fair area, Or there's also in the career fair information on Handshake, there's a spreadsheet that our employer relations team has made that you can also filter things by. So there is some information about whether or not there are specific roles that certain people are looking for, or it may just say various general, there may not be anything specific. So I would really research that, see what their deal is, kind of understand what the organization is, um, maybe have some questions ready. That's always good. Thoughtful questions really make people stand out. But this research for the point of this presentation is so you can make your action plan for your resume over the next few days, this weekend, time prior to the fair. So scenario one is I don't have a lot of time. Scenario two, you know what? I have a moderate amount of time. I can, put, oh, hello, Brad. Sorry, that's my cat, Brad. He's like, why are you still online right now? But I have a moderate amount of time, so you may have a few hours that you can dedicate this weekend. Or scenario three is I am dedicating my entire weekend to this, which again, that's a little dramatic. But if you, I'm so sorry, Brad, you are really not, sorry about that, folks. If you are able to dedicate a lot of time, what that would entail. So the other piece is before we kind of jump into the plans of attack for these different scenarios, and you may fall somewhere in between, like some of these things. Again, these are large categories, but no matter what, when you go to the fair, I would encourage you to have 2 to 4. Yeah, no, I know you can't see him. He's like walking around the back of it and like chewing on my computer, and there's his tail right now. Um, but sorry. I would have like 2 to 4 extra resumes. So if you think I'm gonna go talk to 6 employers at the fair, I would encourage you to have anywhere up to, 8 to 10 resumes with you. And again, those extra ones can be a little bit more general. But you never know who you're going to talk to, and you don't want to run out of them if you do happen to kind of just start a conversation with someone. Okay, so I was also really proud of this image. It is a stock image in Excel. So if you ever want a screaming alarm clock, that is there for you. All right, so scenario one. I don't have a lot of time. I totally understand that. But we do want to make sure that as you are preparing for the fair, that, on a baseline, this is like minimum what can be done to make sure that you have a good, solid resume. So we want to make sure that you have a page, a good, solid page of relevant information. So things that are going to be either direct or transferable to the types of things in at these organizations you're interested in. My exceptions, so here's my little side note on curriculum vitaes or CVs, which tend to be more academic in nature and can be very long, or federal resumes, which typically are going to be used more so for people who sometimes students make them. A lot of times it tends to be something once a student kind of gets into federal employment, they start to have their resume get longer and longer and evolve. So if you are interested in federal resumes, that's something that our office can definitely talk with you about. If you have one now, great, lovely. I don't know if that needs to be your priority right now. So if you're like a sophomore, I wouldn't worry about a federal resume. A first-year student, I wouldn't worry about that. For someone who has graduated or is in senior year, I still think that it might not be totally necessary. And if anything, maybe making a really, really solid one-page resume and then having that discussion with the recruiter when you see them. And then you can always update these documents before you officially apply. Yes, you are handing them your resume. This is to help them remember you. This is to help jog their memory of the candidates that they've talked to that day. But a lot of them are going to tell you, oh, this is so great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have this. I'm going to make sure that, I keep track of all the people that I talked with. But I need you to apply online by such and such date. Like they're probably going to give you a formal application that you need to fill out. So when you go and do that, it might be that when you talk with them at the fair, like, oh, do you all really want a federal resume for this? And they say, oh, yes, that's what we want. Okay, we can help you with that. That might be something that needs to be worked on. Or if they're like, oh, we don't expect that for entry level, then you're probably going to be good. I'm going to look at the Q&A really fast because I saw something come up. Okay. There is a question. I'm currently a sophomore. Will most employers be looking for experience? And if so, how much? That is a great question. So in terms of experience, we do have, I believe there are, I want to say notations or listings of like if there are major preferences for class year. But honestly, part of this is showing transferable experience from your clubs and organizations, volunteering. Just because you haven't had a paid role in something, that's okay. And especially for internships, people are looking for potential. I also think that adding things from your classes can be really important, and I can show examples of that as well. I mean, with a lot of students who think that, oh, I don't have anything for my resume, and it might just be that it's stuff they haven't thought that they can put on their resume, and they totally can. So in terms of how much experience are people looking for when it comes to an internship, they want to see from whatever experiences someone is sharing, again, whether those are clubs, activities, schoolwork, volunteering, that those types of things that they've done transfer to what they're looking for. That's really what we're trying to showcase. So part of this may be, if it's not a job, maybe it is looking at getting more involved this year to find things to leverage for intern applications in the future. So that is something to possibly consider as well. Okay, so if you have a federal resume and you want to bring it, that's okay. Make sure that it is stapled and that like the pages aren't going to go everywhere. I think that's one really big thing about going to a fair. There's going to be lots of pieces of paper that these recruiters are keeping track of. So the one page does have its benefits in this situation. But if it's like a research position or a more advanced federal position and you have those versions, sure, bring that. But typically right now we're really focused on that one page, and you can find out more about the job and what they're looking for, and the official resume you submit, you can always update. If you're wondering, how do I tailor this document when it's general? I'm going to be applying to a lot of different places, a lot of different employers. How do I make a document like that? Because a lot of the times you're going to hear from us, tailor your documents, tailor your resume, tailor your cover letter. But this is a career fair. It's a bunch of different stuff that those two things seem at odds. What I would encourage you to do, and we can provide this link either in the chat, I'll do it later, or we can do it in follow-up. But there's this thing called the NACE, that's the National Association of Colleges and Employers. They've worked with employers to kind of figure out what are the big qualities that they look for in grads. And there's 8 of them. They're pretty, like, I don't want to say simple, but they're overarching ideas like communication and leadership and teamwork. These types of ideas that we want to showcase. When in doubt, I always like go into the NACE competencies to think about, okay, if this is the stuff employers are looking for, what have I done in my job that relates to these things? Maybe that can help me in writing my bullet points for my resume. I would also make sure that you have a skills section on your resume. Baseline, again, if you're talking to a lot of different employers, they may be looking for very specific skills. So if you are talking to some of our STEM folks, and you've done a lot of different things in labs and you know a lot of lab techniques and know maybe how to use SPSS for data analyzation and all that kind of stuff, that would be really, really great and easy for them to see really quickly. And then the big thing, and I'm going to give you some tips later on this, but make sure there are no typos and like layout inconsistencies. We want things to be consistent. And that can be a huge just visual turnoff for people, well, this is spelt wrong. This is not the same as this. That shows an attention to detail type of thing. So this is if you don't have a lot of time, baseline. What I would really encourage you to make sure is ready for your resume. I have a moderate amount of time. I have a few hours this weekend. I could, make these a little more specific. So we're building off of scenario 1. You're still making sure that all of those basics have been taken care of, but something that you can do, again, a step above that, is tailoring a couple of versions of your resume based on the category of things. So if you know, all right, yeah, I'm going to go talk to some different like NGOs and nonprofits, but this one is super research based. And then these jobs are really like event planning and more nonprofit management based. You may want to have 2 different versions of your resume, one that focuses a lot on like research related things, and then another one where you focus more on administration, organization, event planning, again, depending on the types of skills and experiences you have. But that I think is an option, is thinking of, okay, are there a couple of categories or versions I would want to make based on the jobs or organizations? This may just mean changing some bullet points around. Again, your experience is your experience, especially for students who are a little earlier in college. You're going to get even more things that you're going to do. But right now, it may be adjusting bullet points because, I researched something for this and I also planned an event. Well, maybe we're going to lead with the research-based bullet point for a research-related role. You may, if you're further on in your college experience or grad, you may need to swap experiences in and out. You may need to change things. There may even be projects or papers from school. If there's very specific ones that relate to the type of organization's mission, maybe you want to make sure that one is on the resume you're going to give to them. And then, as mentioned before, incorporating coursework in some way, and I will provide some examples of that as we move forward. So that's kind of like our next step. I've got some time. I want to make sure that I'm covering my bases, but still a little general. And I don't expect everyone to spend all weekend on this. Again, this was more of a dramatization. But if you are planning on spending a lot of time getting ready for the fair, okay, you've covered scenario 1 and 2. We've done all of those things. Now is the moment where you think about, okay, this organization has this specific job. I am now going to tailor a resume that I am specifically going to hand to that organization because I have tailored it to the job. Um, so again, we have the information in Handshake in a couple of different places of what the employers are coming to talk about. Again, a lot of them are coming in general, so that, can be challenging. But when there is something specific, obviously it's always nice to see the effort put into that. So make sure if you do go the extra mile to make a super, super specific job specific resume, make sure you mark it, put a sticky note on it, something, so it doesn't get mixed up. And that way you can find it easily when you're walking around with your folder or your stack of papers around the fair. I would encourage like a folder or something. That way you're able to have your stuff, but then there's also going to be handouts and other things from employers as well. So it doesn't get all jumbled up. But let's see, then the nice thing about going the extra mile early with really, really super tailoring some of these specific resumes is that it will make it easier as you apply to their job portals. Like you would be ready, like let's say you talk to someone, maybe you get some insight on ways that you can, make your resume even better. So you do a couple edits, but you pretty much are ready when you get home later that night to submit your application right away. So again, it's doing a lot of prep ahead of time to make it easier later kind of things. So again, those are 3 scenarios. You're probably going to fall somewhere in between them. But those are just some things to keep in mind. So now I want to get into some tips for your resume. So actually like the nuts and bolts of layout and things like that, creating it, descriptions, that sort of thing. So formatting basics. I run into this a lot with first and second year students, especially, is that we use Times New Roman for everything in academia. It is that academic essay font. Sometimes in your syllabus it says this needs to be in size 12 Times New Roman. For your resume, you are not married to Times New Roman. You can use any font that is easy to read. So that's one of those big things, is we want to make this easy for someone to see what it is that you're trying to show them. So common types of fonts, I have some different examples. So there's the serif fonts. Again, our friend Times New Roman, Cambria, Georgia, Garamond. The thing about these is that the smaller they get, the harder they are to read, which is why often I will encourage students to think about sans serif or French without, that's French sans, but without serifs. So you have Arial, Trebuchet, Calibri, Verdana are just some examples. I would stick to something that is standard in Word. So if you ever have to email this to yourself and you're opening it on a different computer, that it doesn't freak out. But you can see a size comparison of just Arial versus Times New Roman. As we go from 16 to 10, I can still read the Arial size 10 a lot easier than the Times New Roman size 10. So that's just something to keep in mind and may help if, especially for our juniors and seniors and graduates in the room and grad students, maybe you feel like I'm running out of space. I need more space. How do I make space? It might be playing with the font and the size. All right, so again, sizing information, your name actually should be the biggest thing on the resume. We want that to be something that is gonna stand out. That way, if someone's flipping through stuff, especially, again, these recruiters are gonna have actual paper in their hands. But if they're flipping through stuff, we wanna find your name faster or have your name be prominent enough that it catches their eye. The other thing is that if they're scrolling through digitally when you submit things online, it also is going to make it easier for them to find. The section titles, so education, you can see is a little bit larger than our basic font, but smaller than our name. That's around 14 to 16-ish points. Again, these can vary a little bit, but this is sort of a starting point. And then the context information or your content info, that's going to be somewhere between 10 and 12 points. So you can see kind of the top of a resume here. This is ideally kind of what we would like to see in basics. I know for a fact that I'm looking at Susie's education. So it, again, just makes it easier for us to read. And strategically using things like bold, italics, underlines. We don't want to use them a bunch, but we do want to use them to emphasize things. All right, so what are the sections that should be on a resume? So again, this can vary a little bit, but like absolutely baseline, name, contact information, your education info. So obviously American University. For the first and second year students on the call, I wouldn't necessarily, especially for the career fair, because these are all very mostly, some of them might be a little bit further out, but mostly these are DC or like DMV area organizations. I wouldn't worry so much about your high school, again, especially if you need the space. By the time you're in junior and senior year, you're definitely not going to have your high school on there anymore. So definitely, we just want the American University, but that can be flexible for students who are earlier in their career, and then the experiences that are relevant to the things you want to apply to. Optional things. Again, I think a skills section is really, really important, especially if you're STEM. Like, I want to know the different types of coding languages that you know. I want to know, the types of lab techniques, statistical software. But even if you're more on the creative side of things, you may see in a lot of job descriptions, like we need someone who's able to, make PowerPoints or slide decks, as they like to call them now. And it may seem very elementary that, yes, I'm in college, of course I know how to use PowerPoint. But if they have named a specific software that you know how to use, we would want to see that on the resume. Certifications, volunteering, involvement activities. The volunteering, involvement activities, research, and projects could all be considered experience. So that, again, depending on how you want to categorize things, I do see these as very valuable experiences. But some people will break them out separately. So it just kind of depends. But again, these are all things that could be in there, as well as honors and awards or very custom categories. You get to kind of decide how you want to categorize your experience. That's going to be easier as you gain more experience, though. All right. So I know you can't actually read these resumes. That's not why they're up here. It is so you can see the difference that a margin can make. So your default of stuff is probably going to go to an inch in Word or Google Docs. But you can go down to 1/2 an inch if you want to. And that, so the version that's over to the right, that one, obviously you're fitting a lot more. This is Milton. This is the other cat that is also going to make an appearance right now, I guess. All right, bye. Oh, sorry about that again. So just so you know, you have some flexibility. You can decide what works for you. Again, if you're running out of space, this can definitely help out a lot in giving you more real estate to play with. So that's just something to be aware of with your margins. All right, so the experience entries themselves. So if you're talking about a job you have on campus or a past internship you've had, or maybe a part-time job you had all throughout high school. Whatever that is, volunteering or a club or organization. I want to use the word experience very open and inclusive because it could be a variety of things. But regardless, we want to know for context your role, the organization that you did it with, the location, city and state, and then the dates that it happened. So month, year to month, year, or month, year to present, if it's still currently happening. So you can see some examples. Again, all of this is the same information on here, but it's different layouts to give you options, things to think about. If you find yourself maybe using one of the versions that is on the bottom, so the 2-line context, and you're like, you know what, I need some more space on the page, you may want to consider trying to consolidate your context information into one line, because then that's going to give you a line of space back for every entry you have. So these are, again, just some examples of trying to organize your context information. The actual experience entries, once you get into the description, we always want to start with a verb and use bullet points. So if your resume right now is like chunks of text, so like you have information about what the job is, but then it's like 4 or 5 lines of a paragraph, or maybe it's bullets, but like you don't have them in a line, but you could break them apart. We want to see bullet points, no paragraphs, because we want individual accomplishments and ideas. Or if it is a combination of things, they need to complement each other. So we do have a handout of skill clusters of different things, so we can as well follow up with that. If you are struggling with how do I describe something or how do I start this bullet point, we want to make sure that you are able to express what it is that you've accomplished. So there's lots of different ways to do that. What I would say, my caveat about verbs, try to avoid things like assisted, helped, aided. If you have those verbs starting your bullet points, it's not wrong, but there could be something a lot stronger there. So if it was helped organize fundraising event that raised $6,000, okay, well, it would be a lot stronger and it would put a number in this description if we said organized fundraising event with a team of 6 that raised $6,000. So not only are we starting with the stronger verb, but we also are mentioning teamwork. All right. So what needs a description? How do I write a good one? So sometimes most things are going to have bullet points with them. There might be some exceptions. If you have an awards section, it may just be the bullet point with the name of the award. Maybe you want to give some context to it, but if it is like, best science student of 2024 at, Hilton High School, we probably don't need more information than that. If you have an additional experience section where you just want to name a couple of, like, maybe you had a part-time job that you don't want to go into description of, that could be an exception as well. But most of the time, if you're giving an experience entry, we want bullet points. We want some sort of description. I like to encourage students to ask themselves as they are writing these bullet points. And this may be something to do as you tailor these resumes for the job fair, is asking yourself, okay, how has my policy internship made me a good candidate for this entry-level role at a think tank? Or if it's volunteering, how has being a volunteer at my local animal rescue made me a good candidate for working at a nonprofit in general? So you may want to ask yourself, how does this make me a good candidate? And that can help you with tailoring those bullet points. And sometimes it's also asking yourself, what's my proudest accomplishment from this experience? We tend to light up when we start talking about what it is that like we're proud of, and that's always a great thing, especially in like interviews or even as you're talking to some of these employers. Something to get you excited and show that you're really passionate about these things that you're talking about. What is something that you're really proud of? All right, so this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but as your resume continues to evolve, further tailoring, and I'm gonna pull up some examples. We'll get out of this presentation and I'm gonna jump from a couple of things so you can see a resume evolve over time. But maybe instead of it just being experience, as you have more experiences that fit a specific category, it could be that you have a research experience section. It could be that you have a policy research section. It could be that you have a political organizing experience section. It really just depends on whatever it is that you have. I know for me, thinking back to my time, I was a theater major in college originally. I would have loved to do something with like arts administration experience. I could have had a section that was called that on my resume. So it just kind of depends. That may not be a right now thing for you, especially if it's a lot of different types of experiences. But as they become more specific, that might be something to consider. Class projects, we've talked about this a couple of times so far. Don't discount the class project. I think that your education is preparing you for your future careers, and we want to be able to show that. So I'm going to give you some examples of what either a short list of classes with a project look like, or if you turned an experience, like a project or a paper, into a full-on experience entry. Those are two options that you can potentially consider, depending on your needs, the length of the document that you're working with, how much space you have to play with. And then when it comes to your descriptions, sometimes I see resumes where there's a bullet point and it's just 3 or 4 words. We want to try to dig a little bit deeper than that to give the scope of what it is that you've accomplished. So whenever we can, again, that's not going to be every bullet point, but it can be, a lot of different moments where you may have something with money, again, raised a certain amount of money for, a charity or volunteering. Maybe there was a certain number of people, like if you are a like campus tour guide, and you have to give tours to, 25 plus people at once, that is something good for me to know, especially if there's public speaking involved in the job that you want to be applying to. Percentage increases. This is something that you're going to want to keep track of or think about moving forward. Sometimes it's hard to calculate it after the fact, but if maybe you are doing social media stuff, this is very common with social media, what's the follower increase percentage or the percentage increase over 3 months of interaction with a post, for example. Or maybe you worked with kids a lot. I know one of my first jobs was working at a summer camp. So I had, gosh, 12 children between the ages of 7 and 9 that I was responsible for. So kind of if children, working with children or education in some way is something you're interested in, that can provide some context as well as of what you've done previously. So let me see what is, okay, so this is I'm going to come back to questions because I do want to show you a couple of examples really fast, and then we're going to come back to questions. So let me go ahead and stop sharing for just a moment so I can get what I want. I already have it prepped. I just need to switch things over. Um, We're not going to dive super deep into these, but I do want you to see these are actually the samples from the margins, that slide that had the margins on it. These are those resumes. So you can see this is kind of my first year example of a student. Again, you may be beyond this for our first years in the room, but I want to give kind of a basic starting point that can continue to evolve. We do have the high school on here for the time being. Again, that could come off, but I do think it's important for you to see what that could look like, especially if maybe you want to apply to things back home for the summer. Sometimes it's nice for people to see that you're local or you grew up in that area. But we're keeping it pretty simple. We have experience and involvement, so things that the student was, paid to do, and then involvement. So these were leadership roles, these were activities, volunteering, those types of things. If activities or involvement doesn't feel right, but you had a lot of like leadership roles in college, or for our first second year students, maybe your senior year of high school, you had some leadership positions and you want to focus on those, you could have the section be leadership if you wanted to. But again, we're keeping things pretty basic. This is size 12 Times New Roman. And again, this is a good entry level resume. As Susie is, moving on through college, this is more mid-college for us. So this is kind of the example of if you were to put and not have too much, you don't have a lot of space, but you want to put some of your classes and projects on there. This is an example of having a section of relevant courses and projects, the name of the class, so we bolded that, and then colon, and then 1 or 2 lines about a specific accomplishment in that class. So this allows us to showcase some things that are very relevant from courses without taking up a bunch of space. We can also see in this sample that our experience section has now become communication and writing for Susie, because now we are categorizing the experiences a little differently. The eagle, for instance, was, or like the yearbook and the eagle were in her involvement in the previous one. Now it's in communication and writing, as is her job. So again, you get to kind of decide how you want to categorize things if that fits. This may not be where you're at right now. And then we still have that part-time job, but now we're calling it customer service experience. So it's just a little bit different. It's evolved. We've gotten some more skills that we've added. And then by senior year, I will use this with seniors, I will use this with graduate students, but we have the most narrow margin that you can. The font has changed again. It is a size 10. This mid-college was an 11. So you can sort of see how that has changed. We're fitting a lot more on the page. Our education has gotten smaller. But we have added more names of classes. It helps us get some keywords on there. But in terms of the actual projects from class, we don't need them as much because we have more relevant experiences. Like she's gotten an internship at a couple of different places. She's been a part of some things with school, but you will see down here, we do have 2 projects that we are treating as experience entries. So if I wanted to, I could also have like communication coursework. If I wanted to have that be a section and those 2 things just live in there, I could do that. But right now it's living under public relations and communication experience, but I'm making it very, very clear that this was a project for a course at American University when it happened, and I'm describing the experience and showcasing what I did or what Susie did in order to successfully complete this. And then another tailored section. So now we're getting not only public relations nice and big on the resume, but we're also getting social media nice and big on the resume. So again, this has evolved. Again, students who are more senior year, junior year, grad school, this might be more where you're at right now. Maybe, maybe not. Again, these are options. They're just options. And then our skills. So let me go ahead. I will make sure that you all get the NACE competency information. So that's what these categories are. So if you have to think about, you know, critical thinking. How was I a critical thinker in this position? Because I know that research and analysis is super important. So what did I do that was critical thinking related in my job? Again, these might help prompt you to think about what you want to write as your bullet points. All right, so that kind of then brings us back to question and answer. So I will open it up for anything else. I do see that we have some more questions. So, okay, I think for some of the open questions, what if it's a double-sided page? So I think that we're talking about a resume that might be front and back. As long as it is relevant information, I think that's okay. I'll be honest, I don't often see that a lot, but I think it is okay, and I think it depends on what it is that you're showcasing, but it has to be relevant. We don't want it to just be fluff, but if it's a front and back, solid information, solid relevant information, I think that's okay. But if you are going on to a second page, this is where students sometimes get, like they start going onto the second page and then they can't fill it. If you can't fill the second page with good quality information, then you need to focus on the one page. That's typically what I would say. What's the most recommended font or font size for most employers? Again, I think your basic information or the content, somewhere between 10 and 12, that's pretty standard. I would say, honestly, an Arial or Calibri is always going to be easy to read, but any of the ones that I showed you earlier work. All of those are accepted. Oh, sorry, never mind. The question's being answered. Okay. And then what's the difference between experience and involvement? That is a great question. So on the resume, that first one, Susie's first resume, part of that was, I think a lot of students tend to think like, oh, I can only put things that I got paid to do on my resume, and that's just not the case. But I think for that version, it was more so, okay, here's the experience that I have in the workplace, and then here's the involvement that I have outside of the classroom. So that was kind of the thought behind it, but that's also one of those things. These headings can be tailored however you want them to be. Some people like the heading extracurriculars. Some people, again, will fit in clubs and organizations that are relevant to certain categories, again, like communication, or maybe you're part of a research team on campus. And you could either have a research section specifically, or if you've done a variety of different research related things or things having to do with analysis, it could be that you want to fit that in all together in some sort of section. So, how do you know if specific information is or is not relevant to a certain employer? So, that is really, really good question. I would probably say it's hard without like a very specific resume and a specific job description in front of me. Because the thing is, I personally believe we can find value in a lot of things. Like, for instance, someone may think like, oh, I did varsity sports in, like, if you're a first year student and you did varsity sports in high school and you're like, well, who really cares about sports? A lot of people do. Actually, a lot of employers really love to see the teamwork aspect of things. But I think that's the piece is you have to be asking yourself, how does this relate to the job? Because if you have, let's say, you were captain of the soccer team your senior year of high school as a first year student here now, that's a leadership position. It shows teamwork, but the bullet point's not going to be played soccer. It's going to be mentored a team of 25 other high school players, and increased our winning streak from, 5 to 7, that the last season. Or again, you'd have to think about it, but I think mentorship is really good. Collaboration with a team. Those are the types of things that I would want to see for something like that, that maybe doesn't immediately seem like it's relevant. But as you've gotten further into college, I would probably say it's going to be a matter of, oh, I could put, this research assistant. I had, an internship at an organization, and then maybe I have like 3 or 4, customer service related positions. I would say in that case, sometimes you have to prioritize what was most recent. So the internships and the research and maybe 1 or 2 of the customer service things. Or if it's a lot of the same stuff, you pick what is most, what has the most like magnitude or meat to it. So again, I know that that's kind of general, but I think that that also would be a great question to work with as you see things that you like, working with a career advisor to talk about that more, of how can I show that these things are relevant? Because I think that's usually the question more so than is it. All right. I know we've hit 7 o'clock. So if you have any other questions, we have some other workshops that are coming up. If you would like your resume reviewed, we actually will be having resume stations on Monday and Tuesday. So Monday will be virtual. And then Tuesday will actually be in the Career Center in the afternoons. So all of that information is on Handshake, but let's say you want to work on your resume over the weekend and then have somebody actually check it. A career advisor would be able to do that with you on Monday or Tuesday. Again, Monday is going to be virtual drop-in, and then Tuesday is going to be in person in the actual career center. But thank you all so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and we will see you around.